Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining me again today. And it's rare that I get to interview friends of mine that I've been friends with for a long time. But today is one of those cases where I get to interview a guy that I worked with. He was my boss at one time, a mentor, and he has remained a dear, dear friend. You can find him on LinkedIn at Joe Romzek, R-O-M-Z-E-K. He is a sales trainer, a leader, a coach, and just a great guy. I call him JR, and you can too after this conversation. Joe Romzek joins me on the Intentional Encourager podcast. JR, how you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing wonderful, Brian. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and talk to you for a few moments today. So thanks for having me on today.
You look way better than I do. I mean, again, here I roll up in like a T-shirt and like I threw some stuff in my hair, like I just got out of bed, and you look like you're ready to just take on the world, man. This is the JR I know and love.
I am ready to take on the world, Brian. Every day you get up, it's a new day, a new challenge, and a new opportunity. So ready to take on the world.
JR, this time that we're in right now, and you and your family live in Michigan, and it's different everywhere. This pandemic has affected people in different ways. What have you seen through this so far that's given you hope and given you some encouragement that you've seen positively through the pandemic?
Well, really, I'm starting to see people come together a little bit more as far as wearing the mask, holding doors for each other, keeping the 6 feet distance without getting irritated and irrational at the stores. So it seems like people are slowing down just a little bit here in Michigan, kind of taking it easy and giving each other a little bit more space just due to the pandemic, and everyone seemed to be masking up a little bit more. Now it's a mandate just recently in the last couple of days indoors.
Yeah, we've got the same one here in West Virginia. So
Okay, yeah.
But JR, and what I love about you is you have led teams, and I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. I love that, bringing people together. So let's talk about that for a minute. In your role, in your previous roles, you've led large teams, you've led small teams. In leading a team right now during uncertain, unusual times, what should a leader's main message be to his or her team right now through something like this?
I think it's going to be, the message should be clarity, letting people know that there is a leader in charge and that they have a very clear message that it's going to be okay and that this is what should be done along the way. But just having a good leader altogether is really what's needed. Somebody that can really step up to the plate and walk everybody through the valley of darkness, because we're in unprecedented times right now. We don't know what's going to happen, and we need that figure of strength and a leader that's got the confidence to walk us through.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, again, everybody's kind of flying by the seat of their pants, right? I mean, it's one of these things, we've not been here before. No matter what business you're in, you and I together, we were in higher ed when we worked together. I've been in food and different things, and so every industry is different. But for you, what do you think the worst thing that a leader could be doing right now? And if somebody's listening, maybe they're going, I didn't think I was doing that, but maybe I'm doing that. And now I can see why my team's got some heartburn from it.
Sure. Just not taking the bull by the horns and kind of just being a little soft and not knowing where you're going. I think that's the worst thing you can do, is to take a hands-off approach and to kind of wait and see what's going to happen, because I think everyone's has a lot of turmoil and anxiety in their lives right now. And so I think people are looking for some of that. Yeah, the worst thing that a leader could do is to stand back and do nothing. These are some times of high anxiety and people don't know what's going on. So they need someone that's strong and bold, that can stand up and take the bull by the horns and tell the team where they're going, what we're going to do, how it's going to go. I think the worst thing you could do is just kind of sit back, be quiet, and not say anything, and leave people to the worries of what may or may not happen in the future.
Yeah, I think inaction from a leader right now, JR, because then that gives the team even more anxiety, right? Because it's like, okay, well, if you don't have a clue, how are we supposed to have a clue? You know, we when we worked together in higher ed, we worked remotely, so we know what that's like. But for a lot of people, they don't. What was the biggest thing you had to learn when you first started working remotely about how to do it and how to do it effectively?
Well, my problem was being able to turn it off, because when I was always on, and when you're at home, you're like, well, I could be working. I mean, it could be 9 o'clock at night. I could be doing more. I could be doing more. And so I'm kind of that type of guy that has a hard time turning it off. So when I was working from home remotely, I had to know when to be able to say, okay, it is 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. I'm not going to think about work. I'm going to shut it off and do other things, family things. And so just being able to shut it off and know how to balance it all out.
Well, and for guys like us, you know, we were used to it. I've been working from home now for the last 4 months. I've done it before, so I kind of knew what to do. But there are some people, man, it's brand new for
Sure.
them doing this because they've always gone into an office. They've gotten in their car at 7 or 7:30. They've gotten to the office by 8. They get an hour for lunch. They get out of the office at 5. They got a half-hour drive home. It's just that same routine day in and day out. What's the one productivity hack that you mentioned you there were times that you had to know how to turn it off? What was the one thing that you did that helped you be more productive that you could share with somebody from that experience the first time that you worked remotely from home?
Sure. I guess just treat it like a regular going to work job. Like, I dress up, I try to look nice, I feel better about myself, and then I start it right in the morning, right at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm on hitting it from the get-go. So some people may just kind of make coffee, see their kids goodbye, and kind of get tangled up with some of the family obligations that happen when you're working remotely. But you can't do that. You have to have your dedicated office, your dedicated space, and treat it just like a 9 to 5, 8 to 5 type of position.
Man, that's so good because, again, we can get lost in the fact of, oh man, I'm not feeling it today, so I'm just gonna kind of mail it in. I'm just gonna kind of go, well, you know, I'm working from home and this is the new normal. And man, there's a lot of times it's easy just to mail it in, right? I mean, is that one thing that people have to guard against, is kind of mailing it in, or what's the one thing that you kind of see as a red flag? If you see yourself doing this, then you know that you're not really as engaged as you need to be.
I would say having the television on. That's one of the things that I don't. The TV off at all times, so I don't get sucked into the television of the day.
You know, that is so important. And here's the thing too, man. These devices that we have, I mean, they're televisions in our pockets, and you know, so many people, whether you're in an office or whether you're working from home, a lot of times our cell phones, our iPads can be distractions away from keeping us from doing what we need to do. I want you, if you would, to take us through take me through your career. I always ask people when they come on the podcast, how did you get from point A to point B, from where you were to where you are now? Kind of take me in through the journey of your life and career for a little bit.
Sure, sure. Well, I've always loved helping out people. That's part of who I am. I'm an Eagle Scout, and part of scouting is giving back to the community. And it's something that's been ingrained in who I am. So I really like helping out people. So one of my first jobs out of college was an admissions advisor at Baker College. And that's where I would talk to people and help them figure out what types of career paths were available to them, and help them get into their career, help them with their financial aid, and help them launch into a brand new future. So that was my first step into higher education, and I really loved it, did very well at it. I became a road recruiter. That's basically where you go out during the day and give presentations at the high school, talking about the college and setting students up for success beyond high school. So we would generate some leads, some inquiries there, and then we'd call them. And we did really well at Baker College, grew it quite a bit. And then my wife and I decided to move to Tennessee. We had vacation down there, and the weather was very appealing to us, and we found a great deal on a house, and moved to Tennessee. And I became a recruiter for ITT Tech and did very well with them. Became an outside recruiter.
I got to stop you a minute. I remember, refresh my memory, because you had a certain automobile that you rolled around in down there in Tennessee. And I was privileged to ride in that thing a few times. And if there ever was a vehicle meant for a certain guy, it was this car with this dude. It was the JR Mobile, man. You gotta tell the audience. Was it a Buick? Is that what it was?
Brian, I'm still rolling around in a Buick LeSabre today.
Yes! The Buick lives. The Buick lives.
Well, what happened?
That's phenomenal, man. That is the best thing I've heard all day today.
Yeah, well, that car that I was rolling around in there, that had over 300,000 miles on it, and I got hit. And so the insurance cashed me out, and I went to Florida and found the exact same car with no rust and only 100,000 miles on the car. And so now I got the exact same car as I've had for the last 10, 20 years. So
that is such a beautiful thing, man.
You stick to it.
That is such a beautiful thing. I remember the first time I saw that car. I was like, my word, this is glorious. This is glorious. So you moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. How much of a culture shock was it for a Detroit, Michigan boy to go to Knoxville, Tennessee?
Well, Knoxville wasn't too bad. I actually lived up in a more of a rural area in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. And that was it was definitely a culture shock. It was a little bit different. Just everything about it was a little bit different. So that was exciting for me. I really enjoyed it, made a lot of friends, and friends that I still keep in contact with today, and still go down and see them and hang out with them down in Oliver Springs. So I made some lifetime friends down there.
I'm sure your accent was a little bit different for those guys to get used to, wasn't it?
Sure, yeah, I got the "you're not from around here."
Because you had grown up in the Detroit area, right? I mean, you've always grown up there.
Right, yeah, I spent 25 years in Detroit and then moved down to Knoxville and outside of Knoxville. And definitely I had the accent in that area. So
now, I don't normally do this during the podcast, but I'm going to stop and tell a quick JR story here in the middle of this podcast. So back after he and I both left the company that we worked together with, I was working for a company with my dad, and I was actually working in the Toledo area, and I was going to go up to see him. And he always called me Big Sexy. And he said, Big Sexy, whatever you do not stop at an exit called 8 Mile. If you're out of gas, keep going, but make sure you got plenty of gas before you go. If you get to that exit, do not stop. Stay right on 75. Because if you stop at that exit, I may never see you again, brother. And that was the first time I'd ever been to Detroit proper. And I know for a fact my guy may have saved my life that day. You remember telling me that? You're like, man, don't stop. Just keep rolling.
Keep it going. That's right.
And I had a 3/4 ton van too. What was funny, I was driving a 3/4 ton van. And I mean, could you imagine if I had broke down in that neighborhood, like what those guys would have thought? I would have been a sitting duck. I've got a Duck Commander shirt on, so I would have literally been a sitting duck in that place. So you go from ITT Tech, which for those that aren't familiar or don't remember, ITT Tech did a lot of technical training before many of the mainstream colleges adopted that curriculum. ITT Tech was really a leader in technology and preparing students from a technology standpoint. When you think about your time there, what's something that sticks out to you? Because again, you were working for, as I mentioned, you were working for an industry leader that was preparing kids for the next thing. And it was kind of a specialized training field and a specialized college that you were recruiting for.
Yeah, well, it was a good school. Basically, like you said, it was very hands-on, career-related. So that's what students really enjoyed about it, is that they were taking classes that were going to give them skill-based, hands-on training, things that are going to help them get a good job. So that's kind of what made ITT Tech a little bit different. And I've seen a lot of my students be successful and get good jobs. And again, I'm still in contact with some of the students and graduates from Knoxville even today. So
how does that make you feel when you met these folks when they were 16, 17, 18 years old, and now they're in their early 30s and probably some have families of their own now? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about that impact that you may have had on those kids?
It just makes you feel good, Brian. It's one of those things you're like, yes, I've actually helped that person get to where they want it to be. And some of them have really good jobs, making very good money and doing things that they enjoy. So it kind of really makes it all worth it. At the end of the day, you kind of sit back and you say, yeah, I've done some good in my life, not just for myself, but for other people. And I like helping people. So that kind of sits well with me every night when I lay my head down on the pillow.
You and I first met in July of 2009, and I'll never forget the first night I met you. I had joined this university in Kentucky. I'd just come from the food business, and I walked into a Holiday Inn on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky. I walked through the dining room out to a patio, and that's the first time I had met you, was in July of 2009. But how did you get there? I know how I got there, but how did you get there?
Sure. Well, basically, once I finished up at ITT Tech, I did a little stint in real estate. And what I realized is that I needed a steady income. So I went back into my love, my passion of recruiting students and helping students obtain a better future. So that's when I found an opportunity with Sullivan University, and I was working as a recruiter in the Knoxville area to recruit students to go to Lexington, Kentucky, and Louisville, Kentucky. So I was a field recruiter, and so that's how I transitioned.
I've never asked you this, and I'm going to ask you this now. The first time you saw your boy walk through the door and I said, "Hey, my name's Brian Sexton," your first thoughts were what?
What is going on here? Who is this guy?
What rock did they find him out from under? I hope somebody's driving him home. Maybe that's what you thought. No, I just remember. I tell you what I remember is I remember how welcome all of you guys made me feel, because I was coming into that same role. I was a regional admissions officer recruiting students in West Virginia for the Lexi. So you and I shared that responsibility of populating, if you will, or building the enrollment for the Lexington campus. And then we had responsibilities for Louisville as well. I tell you what, I remember too, JR. I remember about a year in, my first year, I was just trying to figure it out. And that's, when you go to a company, a lot of times your first year, you're really trying to figure it out. But the second year, I really felt the pressure, because when we would go to that campus, there were people looking at us like, well, how many students are you going to bring us? That's when I started feeling that internal pressure of, man, there are people's jobs counting on what I'm doing. Did you ever feel that way yourself? Or maybe that was just something I felt, but I don't know if you ever felt that way or not.
I've been in college admissions to know that every lead, every inquiry is a life. And so basically we have to change one at a time. So it's a huge responsibility that we had, and it was a lot of pressure I felt from the beginning all the way to the end, which is a good type of pressure, because you want to be able to really help as many people as you can.
Yep. And you were there, you kind of moved around a little bit, and again, you were my boss for a little bit, and I learned a ton from you. I tell you, the biggest thing that I learned from you is not to be so hands-on. And you told me something, either I can share it or you can share it. The piece of advice that you gave me, you remember what you told me?
Go for it.
You looked at me and you said, some will, some won't. Who cares? Next. Right. And it really changed my thinking, because, and the reason that I mentioned that is, you also told me, you said, look, the more you do for somebody, the less they're going to do for themselves. Where was that honed in for you when you really got a hold of that concept in your own life?
Yeah, that just comes from years of experience. A lot of times you would go and do a lot of work to help people get a scholarship, and at the last minute, they'll just bail on you. And you've done all this work, and you're like, wait a minute here. Why wouldn't you take this free money? And they always have a reason. But it blew my mind time and time again. After you really try to go through, the more you do for people, the less they would seem to want to do for themselves. So that's kind of a mantra that I picked up along the way, and kind of stuck with me the whole time. And then part of prospecting, you get a lot of no's, you get a lot of rejection in prospecting and developing leads. That's just part of it. So that's where the some will, some won't, who cares? Let's call another. Next.
The greatest thing that you ever did for me, and I am going to share this story. I was in Princeton, West Virginia one night, and we recruited in the home of students. We met with the student and their parents. It could be, mom and dad, or a lot of the kids that I recruited were had single parents. So I was talking to this young lady, and her mom were there. And so our job was we would talk about the university. We would go through a video presentation. We would go through a questionnaire. And then if we felt like it was a good fit for the school, we would invite them to apply, and they had to make an application fee. It's not, in the school we worked for was kind of ahead of its time. Many, if not all, state and public universities now require an application fee. But back then we were a little bit ahead of the curve. But this young lady's mom reached into her brassiere and pulled out a $50 bill and handed it to me and says, "I want to thank you for your time," and wanted to give me a $50 tip. And I am sitting there going, "Oh no, this is not good." And I said, I excused myself, and I went out to the car and I called you, and I'm like, they gave me $50. What do I do? Because I wanted to put it in my pocket. I was like, $50 is $50, man. I want to put this jewel in my pocket. And you were like, no, tell them to put it on their housing application. So somehow it got back to the chancellor of our school that this lady had tried to tip me, and I told him to put it on their housing application. And he was like, I love the integrity out of that Brian Sexton. And JR saw it, and he called me, and he was dying laughing. He was just, and we both were just rolling like, yeah, right. I wanted to stick that thing in my pocket, man. But you did. You helped me in that time, because I really did. I mean, I know that's 10, 11 years later, but I mean, $50 is $50. I wanted to put it in my pocket. I was like, man, nobody's going to find out. And it wasn't as I look back, I'm like, they were just trying to be nice, and I didn't know any different. And so I didn't know I wasn't doing anything wrong, but you kept me from making a mistake that naively could have really been detrimental, just not knowing any better. That's my best JR story. I'm calling him like, well, tell them to put it on their housing deposit. So, but you moved on through, you and your family decided after a period of time in Knoxville to move back to Michigan, where you're from. What was that like, going from Knoxville, where you had established roots and friends, and deciding to pick up and come back home and move back home? Because for some people it's a good thing, and some people it's like, it's not really what we wanted to do, but we had to do it. What was that like, making that move back to Michigan for you guys?
Sure. Well, we took all of our vacations to Michigan when we were living in Knoxville. So all of our spare time, we'd always go back home. We loved the weather. I had a ton of friends. My wife had a good career. I had a good career, but I had a opportunity with the Art Institute of Michigan to serve as the senior director of admissions at a startup campus in Troy, Michigan. So it was too good of an opportunity for us to pass up. So we decided to definitely come on home, and mixed emotions. Our family was totally thrilled that we were coming home, and we decided at least we're not going to have to vacation in Michigan, since we'll be living there all the time. We can actually go and vacation in Knoxville or vacation elsewhere in Florida or somewhere. So it was definitely mixed emotions, but it worked out well for the family in the long run. You never know what's in the cards for you until you find out, and it was definitely a blessing in disguise.
I'm thinking here, and it's so easy with a podcast guest that you've known so intimately to get caught up in story time. But I got to ask you this before we transition real quick. Do you remember the night you and I were at a Geno's Pizza in Anstead, West Virginia?
I do. Yeah.
I was asked, we were meeting a student and their family, and the student's parent did not believe we were who we said we were. We had to brandish ID. Continue the interview.
Yeah, wanted to see business cards and
we had to brandish ID. I mean, it wasn't obvious that we had materials on the table with the school we were working for. And I think we had those jackets that they made for us, those black jackets.
Logo jacket with the name
Logo
tag.
sport coats, yeah. And the aunt, the girl lived with her aunt, and she still wanted to see ID.
Yeah. Well, you never know, huh?
That was no, I offered her ID. I'm like, do you want to see some ID? And you looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, where did you pull that out of? And you're just looking at me like, oh my Lord, what's going on here? I will never forget that. That was you and I worked together that night. That was, wow. It's hard to believe it's been 10, 11 years ago now too.
Time flies.
Yeah. Real quick, and I've got a couple more questions for you, man. I appreciate you doing this. I've been looking forward to this all week and just having you on the podcast. Take me through a time professionally when you overcame a pretty big obstacle, because I've known you have come through some challenges in your life professionally, and you always have a way of persevering. What's one that you would share with the audience that kind of would connect someone that may be going through a similar situation?
Well, Brian, the only thing I can really think of is right now what's going on currently with COVID. We don't know what the future is going to hold for us. It's a totally unprecedented time. A lot of people, including myself, are out of work right now and looking for opportunities, and you're looking for a safe opportunity. And so I really don't know, Brian. That's a tough question for me.
Well, and again, I appreciate you being as transparent as you can, because you're right. This may be the biggest obstacle that people face, is what they're facing right now. I mean, who knows how long this pandemic is going to go on, and who's going to end up getting infected with the virus. And thankfully, many people, I think I read somewhere last week, JR, there's been almost 4 million confirmed positives, and we've only had, and I hope nobody dies. I don't want anybody to die from it. We've only had 140,000 deaths. So the math is really low. There have been so many people that have recovered and have gotten better from this thing. And we just wish that if you're listening to this podcast and you have COVID-19, that you recover and you recover well. And if you've had it, hopefully you don't have any lasting effects from it. And so, yeah, JR, as we finish up, man, thank you for doing this, your time. What's your biggest piece of intentional encouragement? What is something that you have leaned on over the years, or what encourages you, something that you would share encouragement-wise and leave with our audience as we close out the podcast today?
Sure, Brian. It's so simple to me. It really comes down to the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you really believe that and really act upon that daily, if you treat other people, if you want to be let in traffic, let the person in front of you in. So I just believe that if you live by that mantra, which I do, that is an intentional encouragement right there. Is doing to others is what you'd have them do to you. So
I've never asked you, but how do you keep a perpetual tan? You look the same. Like you always look tan. Like I've known you for like almost 11 years now. Here I am, like pale white, and you're just like, you always look like you've come back from a beach vacation, man. I love it.
Yeah, I tan easily, so I don't usually burn. And I like the sun. So give me the sunshine.
You're a motorcycle rider, so that doesn't hurt either.
Right. Yeah. Give me some sunshine and fresh air. I'll take it.
Yeah. Joe Romzek, JR, my man. What can I say, man? I appreciate this, and anytime we get together, man, there's always laughs to be had, and I value your friendship all these years, and I thank you. Tell folks how they can get connected with you and get in touch with you, and if they want to connect up with you.
Sure. You can always find me at LinkedIn. It's Joe Romzek, Romzek. You can always email me as well. It's jpromzek, Romzek, @gmail.com. So always looking forward to touch base, and I'm a LinkedIn open networker. So let's talk.
And his cell phone number is 823. No, I'm playing. JR, you're the best, brother. Thank you for joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Stay well, man.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Have a great one. Stay well, too.
My thanks, as always, to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through His Word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place can be an intentional